Good afternoon and welcome back. This is another video in our series where we discuss everyday legal issues with TLR Law. TLR Law makes law accessible for the average Canadian. It's your neighborhood law firm here in Winnipeg, and it really excels at helping you and your loved ones make sound plans for your future. Today we're talking about succession planning for companies. The key to effective succession planning is really to be proactive and plan ahead, but it looks different for every company. Are you buying parents out? Are you trying to bring employees in as new owners? There are as many scenarios as there are companies, and today we're going to talk about a few of the most common ones. My name is Adam Dooley. I'm your co-host. I'm here alongside Philippe Richer, principal lawyer and owner of TLR Law. Hey, Philippe.
Hi, Adam. How are you?
Doing great. It's nice to see some spring weather out there today. I hope it sticks around.
Yeah, no, it is. It's unfortunately there's a little bit of noise going on. We're having some trees taken down, some remnants from that storm we had a couple of years ago. So some of our yard trees have not made it. So there might be a little bit of noise in the background.
Well, we can segue into property liability issues later, maybe. Let's get into succession planning. So when you're talking with clients about succession planning for businesses, now we're talking about ownership succession planning.
Right.
Are you often asked what it is and why it's important? How does the conversation usually start?
Well, it's funny you should say that. It's actually one of the problems, Adam, is that the conversation doesn't usually start until it's too late. Succession planning is something that owners need to work on a long time before they're ready to actually start moving towards moving themselves out of the business. And a lot of business owners are just too busy running their business, doing the things, creating the widgets or selling the services that they're selling. And they don't focus on the business and how are they going to exit from the business later on. There's a lot of things that owners can do to prepare their business over a number of years, actually, to get ready for succession planning and to get ready for that move. Unfortunately, it's not something that's talked about a whole lot. And I think that's a bit of a tragedy because business owners spend a lot of time in their business and they should be able to get the most out of the business when they're ready to leave. And oftentimes that's not the case.
Well, what is the process? What do you recommend to your corporate clients? Because you work with a lot of small and mid-sized companies.
Yeah, so there are different types of businesses. There are small businesses. There are the businesses that are essentially tied to the individual, and those people, they're not really thinking about succession. They're more thinking about, they essentially have a job and they have a corporation that they can perform that job through. You would think of electricians, those kind of business owners. But then you have the businesses that are larger than that, where it's not based solely on the owner, where the owner has staff. They may have equipment, and they may have operators for that equipment, or it's services that they're providing, and they can create something. So those are the owners that really can build a lot of equity into their business by building the business up to make it available to sell at a later date and to make sure that you get the most out of the business when you're ready to sell.
Right. And I know that you can put your business up on the open market and find a buyer, but today we're really focused on another kind of business succession or selling. And that's, let's start with a family-owned business. It's a common problem where mom and dad have built a business. They want to sell it to the next generation so that they can take some of the value out of that business and retire, but it presents a lot of challenges, doesn't it?
Well, it does, right? Because the Income Tax Act of Canada kind of sticks its nose, or CRA rather, sticks its nose into everybody's businesses via the Income Tax Act. So there are a lot of consequences of transitioning from one generation to another, of trying to get a business from one generation to another. Without getting into all of the details of the Income Tax Act, there's the possibility of bringing in a next generation, but you have to do so in a way that doesn't trigger significant taxes for you all at the same time. Because the problem is that if an owner wants to give his or her business to their children, and the business is worth $1 million, and the owner started that business, 20 years ago, The fact that they're giving it over to the son or daughter, even though their intention is to give it for free or for $1, let's say, for shares or the assets, and you would just hand it over. Revenue Canada takes the view that you've disposed of the business at fair market value. They don't care that you've given it to your children. They're saying, nice for you. We're very happy that you trust your children and you're not looking to get any money out of them. But that doesn't work for us. We want to get our share of taxes on the $1 million that you should have sold it for had it sold, or that you would have sold it for rather had it sold on the open market. Therefore, you have to add that capital gains to your income of that year, and then you have to pay taxes on that. Now, there's the lifetime capital gains exemption, and you should talk to your accountant or your lawyer about that. So as long as the business qualifies, then you would have that exemption, and it's about $860,000, I think, right now. So there would be some tax savings there, but if you're into a business worth several million of dollars, there's a lot of planning that needs to go ahead to be brought forward to get it ready so that you can make a transition. Now, there are opportunities to transition and bring in children without having them pay you $1 million, or at least the value of the taxes that you have to pay. But there's some tax planning that has to happen with that. So with your accountant and your lawyer, you'll hear the term freeze, share freeze, where you freeze the value of the company in a different kind of class of shares, and those become essentially, that's money in the bank, except instead of being in the bank, it's in the corporation. And then you can redeem those over a number of years, and then you can bring in a new generation and issue them new shares, and then they kind of take over the management. But all that has to be done properly through the Income Tax Act. There are certain provisions that allow us to do that, and we do that in conjunction with your accountant. We prepare those documents.
And it can be complex for the children buying, right? Because they're often in a point in their careers where they don't have that $1 million. They're going to have to borrow it or pay it down over many, many years.
Well, exactly. And then, I mean, there are a number of factors you need to consider, right? If you have a business, and even though you want to, I use the example of you want to give your business to your children, that's actually quite rare that happens. You build a business over a number of years, over a career, and that's your nest egg. That's your retirement. If it's worth several $1 million, you need to get that money out of the business in order to live, happily ever after, so to speak. And children may not be in a position where they have enough assets at that point to be able to borrow all of that money. So this is where a freeze would happen, and then you would have the opportunity through ongoing business revenue over the years. You'd be able to draw that over a period of, it could be 5, 10, 15 years, where you're drawing a certain percentage of your of the frozen value that you had in the corporation. But yeah, kids typically don't have the opportunity to get the money that the parents would need to get out of the business. So these provisions and these plans, these tax plans, actually work quite well for that.
Well, and you've got added complications too with, there can be family disagreements, and succession planning in a family business can also be tied into estate planning, because maybe there's some children who are not involved in the business. So can you tell us just a little bit about those kinds of situations and how you approach them?
Yeah, these are family situations that do not start off as legal problems, but that could certainly end up as legal issues and legal problems. And this is part of going back to our first conversation about succession planning. There's a lot of work that goes into succession planning. You need to be able to identify the individuals that will be able to take over your business. So that could be people that work for you. It could be buyers from the outside, for example, if you're just going to sell it to the open market. It could be your children, or it could be all of your children, or just one or several of the children, but not all of them. There's a lot of work that goes into that. There's a lot of work that goes into in making sure that the children are aware of what the plans are. There's a lot of work in grooming those children that are coming in, so that by the time they do take over, they have the skills and the experience necessary so that they don't run the business into the ground. So it usually means a number of years working in the business at different levels of the business, so they become familiar with it.
That doesn't happen until the third generation, though, right?
No, right.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. So this planning is really important, and that's why when you're starting to think about succession planning, you need to start years in advance. You need to plan it out, and you have to have a plan B and a plan C, because you may identify one of your kids as somebody who's interested in doing it, and that child may demonstrate that they want to do it, and then as you start putting them through the different positions, you realize that they may not have the skills or the competencies necessary to take over the business. You might have to pivot and make a change, and those expectations are set up. And if you start going against that and changing your mind about those things, it can create a lot of problems. So you do want to spend a lot of time upfront, and you want to be over communicating what you're doing, because
Right.
it can create a lot of problems. The kind of problems it can create is when it comes time later on, is you have an unfairness that kind of pops up, and you're a parent and you want to distribute your estate or your assets, and you may not be able to do that in an equitable fashion, and then that just creates even more animosity and problems, and I think it's a responsibility that owners have, that they have to do that, because I've represented people who are children of people who didn't plan properly, and I can tell you from experience, families are torn apart by poor planning.
Poor planning and poor communication too, right? I mean,
poor communication, and all the things that an owner has built can disappear over the matter of a short year or two, on top of having a family that is completely destroyed in terms of relationships. And it's actually tragic.
Yeah.
And it's avoidable.
Yeah, and the communication issue is so key, because if you've got one child working in the business, and that child wants to buy that business, they're also contributing value, probably as a member of the management team. And so it's not a simple matter of saying, well, you're going to get the business, Johnny, and Doug is going to get the cottage. You really need to have that frank and open discussion about the relative value of everyone's role and position, don't you?
You do, and on top of that, if your assets, if the majority of your assets are the business and are tied up in the business, and you have one child taking over the business, what do you do for the other children?
Right.
What are you leaving them? Like, how are you going to plan that out? How are you going to ensure that if you want to be equitable with your children, how are you going to ensure that the children that are not involved with them in the business get a share, an appropriate or an equitable share of value? Those kind of things have to be considered and planned for.
It sounds like you really need a team of experts here, not just your lawyer, but your accountant. Who should be on that team for a business owner?
So for sure, absolutely. For sure, your accountant and your lawyer, and maybe even a psychologist or a counselor in certain cases when it comes to, I say that half jokingly.
It's true. It's true.
I actually think that's a great idea. Bring in people that are used to mediating family disputes. Bring in people that are used to mediating difficult family situations, so that it's properly documented, not documented, but communicated, so that everybody's on the same page, so that everybody understands what the constraints are, because there are constraints. I mean, the Income Tax Act of Canada is a huge constraint, and they will get their piece of the pie one way or the other, and they don't care about family dynamics at all. So you need to plan for that, and you need to move around that, and you need to figure out a way that you can at the end of the day ensure as much as you can, because once you die, your responsibility kind of ends. But as much as you can, set it up in a way that you can continue the family dynamics in a proper and cooperative and loving and a caring way. Because I mean, that's why we do this. I suppose there are people that do it for their own ego, but I think the majority of business owners do it because they want to leave a legacy, and they want to provide for their children and their grandchildren.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's shift from a family-owned business to one where the owner, the entrepreneur, is wanting to sell to one employee or a group of employees, which is also a pretty common scenario. Walk us through something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't happen as often as you would in a family business, because a family business, you try to keep it in the family, and you and I both know some people that have, that are second and third generation in the business. But it does happen from time to time that, a buyer, a vendor wants to retire, and they don't have, their children are not interested, or develop a different career, but they have an employee, like a person that's been with them 20, 30 years, or a combination of them that have been there. I mean, it's the same kind of principle that you have in play. And it really depends on their capacities and what you want to do, whether you want to get out completely from the business or whether you want to get out over a period of time. Like, there's a number of strategies that you can apply. These can be structured in a number of ways. I have seen, although I haven't been involved, I have seen, owners kind of give it over to employees who formed a co-op, for example.
Well, that's interesting.
So there are all kinds of ways that this can be done, but it's very similar as with the family. You have the option of selling it to them, so the employees would have to come up with the cash, or you have the option of creating a freeze and bringing in those employees as new share owners, and then you would cash out over a number of years afterwards.
Right. So you really have to be clear on what you want, and be honest with yourself as well as everyone. The people who are potentially buying the company. They've got to be really clear on what the long range plan is, and everyone has to agree to it, don't they?
Right. Absolutely. And the other aspect, and you should always consider what all of your options. You should have, like I said earlier, you should have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. You should consider what all your options are. You go with your plan A, but always keep plan B in mind, because sometimes plan A doesn't work out. And while we haven't really talked about just selling the business in the open market, that is a legitimate plan. That might be actually in some situations, the easiest solution. If you have kids that are not really committed to the business, and there's nobody that's working for you that has the capacity or the skills necessary to become the business owner, you don't have any options. You have to sell the business. But even if that's what your plan is, there's still a lot of work that you should be doing up front to get it ready to sell.
Right.
Because when potential purchasers come along, and this is as much about succession planning as it is trying to bring in a next generation. If you want to make your business attractive to purchasers, their lawyers and the purchasers will be doing due diligence. They will investigate your books. They will take a look at your taxes, make sure they're paid. They're going to want to see things like employee contracts in place, because if you don't have employee contracts in place, the new buyer is assuming the liability of all those employees. And that means if you have long-term employees, they're entitled to a lot of notice if you let them go for any reason, which could be very costly. They're going to want to see a privacy policy in place. We know privacy is becoming a bigger and bigger issue internationally. The European Union has kind of established that people own their information, and that's coming to Canada. We're going to be seeing our privacy policies revised, and there'll be penalties for people that breach the privacy requirements under the federal laws. There's anti-spam legislation. If you're doing any communication via email, electronic, you're subject to that. And there are fines that are being billed out right now as we speak, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to large corporations, and small sole proprietors that are receiving fines of $15,000, $20,000, $30,000. So
this due diligence is necessary not only if you're an outside buyer, but if you're a child wanting to buy your parents' business, you should be doing the same thing, shouldn't you?
You should be, or if you're going to be taking it over, you can, but a child involved in the business for a number of years will be intimately familiar with the business,
right?
And I think they should, because these are hidden time bombs.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't address these issues, you've got essentially a ticking time bomb inside your business that can blow up any time. And when it does blow up, what's going to happen is you're going to turn around and you're going to say, well, it's so unfair. The government, why are they screwing me like this? They're not. The law is the law. It's been the law. It's public. It's your obligation as a business owner to know what your obligations are and to make sure that you cover them. All of these time bombs that exist in your business are all avoidable. Well,
Right.
not all of
Well,
them, but the ones related to these specific items that we talked about. We don't know what we don't know, but we do know that if you don't take care of if you don't have employee contracts, if you don't have privacy policy, if you don't have anti-spam procedures and policies, that you are open to liability. You might as well be driving down the street at 80 kilometers in a 50 zone all the time.
well, it probably goes without saying at this point, but why is hiring a lawyer to help navigate this process really so important? And I can't imagine trying to go through this without my lawyer at my side. So maybe just talk a little bit
Well,
about that.
yeah, and I'll give you a perfect example. I had it wasn't a client of mine. He passed away, and he had real estate. So it was a real estate business. He had real estate, and he tried on his own to create a family trust, or sorry, a spousal trust. And while doing that, he completely screwed it up. And the beneficiaries, which were children from a previous marriage and his new wife, essentially went to war. And the parties spent probably over $100,000 in legal fees altogether to solve it. And the family relationship between the stepmother and the kids was completely destroyed.
The last thing
So
that
nobody
anyone
won.
probably wanted, right?
Right, and all of that because either the individual felt uncomfortable dealing with it because these are difficult things to deal with, or didn't want to hire a lawyer because he felt lawyers were too expensive. And for $1,500 or $3,000 or even $5,000, for a complicated will, and it doesn't matter. The saving what that would have saved the family is you can't put a value on that.
No, you certainly can't. Well, I think there's an infinite number of reasons why you need good counsel to go through succession planning and selling a business. I know that your firm offers some really unique corporate retainer packages, kind of offering a chief legal officer for small and middle-sized and larger companies, so that you always have a lawyer available to you. Can you just tell us a little bit about that before we leave today?
Yeah, so we have some tiers based on the size of your company, so different prices, and the things that we address are exactly those things that I mentioned earlier. We in those monthly price payments that you make, we include contracts, employee contracts. We include, once you get into the second tier, we include a review of your privacy policy, and if it needs upgrading, we upgrade it for you. We review and train your people on the anti-spam legislation and what your obligations are and how you should be getting consent. And if you're not getting consent, what you should be doing. We take a look at your terms and conditions. We do demand letters for you if people aren't paying your bills. We're available all the time during business hours for phone calls. There's no extra fees for that, so you schedule a phone call and you talk to us, and as long as we don't have to prepare anything, all of that is included in your monthly premium. So the idea behind that is to help business owners take care of those ticking time bombs that are sitting in the back closet, getting rid of their skeletons.
Yeah.
And to offer them the opportunity to speak with a lawyer whenever they need, so and not worry about the cost of because it's paid for, it's included in their package, so that we become we get rid of that barrier of people fearing when they're facing problems. I want a business owner, one of our clients, to feel comfortable just picking up the phone saying, hey, I've got this issue, what should I do about it? It's a lot easier dealing with an issue before you make a decision, because we can help you make that decision, than it is after. Because we're lawyers, we're not magicians. We can't make mistakes and errors you make disappear. All we can do at that point is help you navigate that.
Right.
Whereas if we were able to give you some key advice before you made that mistake, you may have avoided that problem altogether.
Maybe we'll just end on one other thing that I know you offer through this service, and just generally, is being part of a company's strategic planning, and
Right.
really succession planning and ownership changes should be part of those annual strategic planning sessions for a company, shouldn't they?
Yes. And I know not all companies do annual strategic planning. I know, yeah, Adam, you do. We do in our company. We have a leadership team where we sit down on an annual basis. I think it's really important that companies do that. Our company started really improving when we established a management team that sits down and does planning on an annual and quarterly basis. And we can certainly, and I think that there's value in that, in having your lawyer present at least your annual, or at least a portion of your annual strategic meeting. Your lawyer doesn't need to know everything about it, but we could give you some key advice in terms of some of the things that you need to watch out for, some of the things that maybe you haven't addressed yet that you should address, so that you shore up the ramparts around your business, and you get rid of those potential ticking time bombs.
Right, exactly. Well, this is a fascinating topic. I think any business owner who's been in business for any length of time has thought about this and worried about it. So thank you so much for your insight today. TLR Law, you can find us at tlrlaw.ca, also at TLR Law on Facebook and Instagram. Please check us out. Please give Philippe and his team a call. They're fantastic and very easy to talk to. They do live their brand and trying to make laws as accessible and understandable as possible. Thank you again, Philippe, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Adam.